Hello, this is Steven Al, and yes, we're back with another Batman 66 review. Today we'll be reviewing the 2017 animated film Batman vs. Two-Face, which is sadly the last time the great Adam West would play Batman, and so far it is really the last media adaptation of the Batman 66 continuity. And before we get into the plot, before we get into the cast, let's get into a bit about the film, a bit of background. So, if you recall correctly, in the last 66 video, we reviewed Batman Return of the Caped Crusader. And it was a big hit. Many people loved it. It was really paying a lot of tribute to the source material, but at the same time did something different. And of course, what made it good is what they had Adam West and Burt Ward and Julie Newmar to reprise their roles as Batman, Robin, and Catwoman, respectively. And like I said, whether you love it or hate it, you can't deny that the whole Batman 66 is just so iconic, and there is a reason for that. And with that huge success, a sequel was inevitable. But there's a few things that would happen to make this film very special. First off, the sequel was titled Batman vs. Two-Face. First off, the title of the film, Batman vs. Two-Face. Now, as we know today, Two-Face is one of the most iconic Batman villains. He is often a fan favorite to many, and to some people, he is their favorite Batman villain. Well, during the original show's run, Two-Face was never adapted. Now, Two-Face did exist in the comics before the TV show, and there was in many talks of him being adapted, with many people rumored to be casted in the role. Clint Eastwood is often what I've always been told was always rumored to take on the role of Two-Face. Of course, Two-Face has appeared in the Batman 66 spin-off comics, but other than that, but even then, he only appeared in, I think, only really one comic, and never really materialized into anything else. The reason why he never appeared because he was a character that was considered too dark for the show. And honestly, that makes sense. It was supposed to be it was kind of like a family kid show. And I guess a villain like Two-Face, with being the more dark and serious and almost tough guy kind of, I would say, gangster portrayal, honestly, of Two-Face has always been presented, at least that's how I always viewed the character, wouldn't, I think, be appropriate. So the ideas were scrapped. But because this is animation, not much limitation, they could use Two-Face. And it seemed long overdue for him to be a part of the 66 continuity. And to make matters even more fantastic, they needed to have someone to do the character, but had to be someone who was actually a 60s actor icon. And to my shock, they casted William Shatner, famous, of course, for his role on the original Star Trek as Captain Kirk. And of course, William Shatner is, of course, another actor who, just like Adam West, after his big show, sort of went into an unemployment at some point, and essentially struggled for work. Of course, he would later succeed working on shows like T.J. Hooker and then Boston Legal. He's pretty much an actor famous for almost overacting. So I was absolutely shocked that they got that, and made me more intrigued to see how this would go. But sadly, you should also know when going into this was Adam West's final performance, and there's a reason. Tragically, Adam West passed away. But the good news is, he managed to finish recording all his lines before he passed away. So this was kind of his last swan song, and a sort of farewell to an interpretation of Batman that I have no doubt will forever outlive him, and he has made a unique interpretation of not the Dark Knight, but the Bright Knight. So with that, the film was released. Now, how do I personally feel about the film? Well, let's get into it. We begin this movie with essentially a radio announcer announcing that Batman is going to the Gotham State Penitentiary for some secret experiment. Here we get a little bit of a fun montage of Batman and Robin just punching down like a few criminals, Sandman, Clock King, and one of Riddler's thugs. But just as that's wrapped up, we see that Catwoman had survived her fall from the previous animated film and is currently locked up. And also her and Batman are dating. I admit, a scene I'd never see. Technically, we got that in the original show, but I wouldn't call that an actual. Well, I wouldn't say that they were proper boyfriend-girlfriend. Here, it's heavily implied that they are really dating. Of course, Robin has to, break up their date, and essentially Batman and him leave to go to the actual part of the facility for this experiment. Here, they are introduced to Professor Hugo Strange, who has developed this evil extractor where he plans to get all of the super criminals to extract all the evil from out of them as part of their rehabilitation. Here, we are also introduced to Harvey Dent. He is Gotham's district attorney, and he and Batman already have a great relationship. It seems to have great respect for each other, and Robin feels a little bit jealous and a little bit intimidated, I would say. It's also heavily implied. It's also said that Harvey Dent is also best friends with Bruce Wayne, and yet he doesn't. But it's also clear that he doesn't know that Batman and Bruce Wayne are one and the same. Then again, that's the same with everyone. Also, here we get a bit of fan service as we get a cameo from Harley Quinn. Now, I want to point out something. Even though I understand why the cameo's here, I feel it doesn't suit the film. Why? Because Harley Quinn was created in the 90s. I'm sorry, but if you're going to have a character like that, it should have been a character that existed around the 66 era. So I thought maybe they should have had Poison Ivy and made it that her and Hugo Strange aren't getting along. I would like that. It would be a nice little fun detail and hinting if there was going to be a third film for her to be the next villain. And again, Hugo Strange is fun here. I also find it weird that Hugo Strange and Harley Quinn don't look like any of the big 66 actors of that time. In fact, they don't look like anything. They don't look at all like anything, just their generic designs. With a 66 touch, of course. But anyway, enough blabbering. Anyway, 5 supervillains are brought in to be the test subjects. These include the big 3, the Joker, the Penguin, and the Riddler, but also Mr. Freeze and Egghead, all strapped in their chair and preparing for the experiment. Warden Crichton is also here on hand to oversee and make sure things go smooth. And just when things look like they're going well, the villains use their evil to overload the machine, causing a essentially reaction meltdown, resulting in an explosion with this I guess chemical that has been built up to explode. And Batman goes to try and save Harvey because Harvey's in direct line of fire. He manages to cover half, but he's too late. He manages to cover half of Harvey, and in the explosion, they try to see where Harvey is. However, he is no longer Harvey. This event, he christens himself as Two-Face. So here in this, instead of the classic acid getting thrown in his face, in this iteration, Harvey Dent becomes Two-Face courtesy of an explosion by an evil reactor that essentially he has been contaminated with all these supervillains' evilness. But because Batman managed to only save half of him, it went into shield half of Harvey, half of it went on him, and as a result, caused him to become the split-face Two-Face. And here we get into the opening credits, and I actually like it. We see Two-Face going on a big crime spree, causing all sorts of crimes and fun little death traps. I really like it. The music score is also good to it, which makes me feel that we're in for something special. Again, and also want to point out the opening to the film and the title sequence. It gives a sort of darker tone than what we're used to, kind of a throwback to season 1. After that, after Two-Face has finally been caught, he is sent to hospital where he finally gets plastic surgery to look like he normally does. Now, because of the events of his crime spree, of course, with him no doubt having a bit of insanity courtesy of a disfigurement, he is allowed to resume his work. But however, he's no longer given his old job, but he's going from basically he's the assistant to the assistant district attorney. And Harvey accepts this, realizing that he has to rework Gotham's trust again, and he will take control of his own fate. It also should be noted that the coin Two-Face uses, just as it was introduced, is actually a memento. He said it himself. It was a souvenir that he kept after he busted a coin counterfeiting ring, and it was his first case. It's a sort of a memento to always keep going and never give up. I like that they sort of incorporate that bit into the story. After that, we pick up several months later, where King Tut is back, along with 2 henchmen, and steals a biplane. And I absolutely love the man doing Two-Face, King Tut here. It feels like he's ripped off straight from the 66 movie, and he just feels so full of life. It's all around fun. Just as they steal the biplane, we then cut back to Wayne Manor, where Alfred and Aunt Harriet are about to take Bruce and Dick's place on a sort of essentially a bus ride, where essentially like Gotham's society will be on this thing, on this bus, for a nice night, and Bruce gives it to Alfred and Aunt Harriet to have a night out on the town. Just as they leave, Bruce Wayne and Dick notice the bat signal. Again, Commissioner Gordon, Chief O'Hara got word that King Tut was back, and rather than investigating, they decide to call up Batman, the usual sliding down the bat poles into the Batmobile and driving off. They then end up on the rooftop. Interesting that it's more, again, this is happening at night, so we get to see the actual bat signal. And I loved every minute, and I like it. It's even though it's 66, it does have a bit of a more modern Batman feel that we would expect, though in a campy way. Realizing they stole the biplane because of some Egyptian thing, they then start some investigating to who could be the possible next target. And they come up with a double-decker bus as it's being being sponsored by a company with an Egyptian thing, and they know this is a perfect thing for King Tut, knowing his background. As a result, King Tut and his men get on the bus and essentially rob these people there of all their valuables, with Aunt Harriet and Alfred also there. Batman and Robin quickly get to the bus, get all the citizens off, and we have a nice fight scene. But Batman and Robin quickly get knocked out by some, I guess, fake snakes with some knockout venom in their fangs, I guess. They then end up waking up in these giant urns. And it's a reminiscent to Season 1, where Batman was in that when they were dropping petals on his head to turn him insane. Again, a nice little reference there. As they are trapped in those urns, King Tut has essentially a cement truck pour cement into it to essentially drown him to death, and essentially walk away. And of course, does the usual, walks away as it happens. And it is of course happening at a construction site for some pyramid building. Of course it is. It's King Tut after all. But thanks to Robin and Batman's rocket boots, that of course we know that they used in Season 2, managed to fly out, knock out King Tut and his henchmen. But King Tut ends up having a brick fall on his head, and he reverts back to his old old William McElroy persona. And when he realizes that Batman and Robin in here, he comes to the conclusion that he was King Tut again. Just as Batman and Robin take the Professor away, 2 mysterious figures appear out of the shadows and end up stealing essentially the valuables that King Tut had stolen. It is also revealed that the biplane is missing and all the loot, and they don't know. They try to interrogate King Tut, as they pretty much end up hitting the Professor on the head to revert back to King Tut. And it's a nice little fun good cop bad cop scene. It's fun. It's funny, it's goofy, it's silly, I love it. But just when they realize they're getting nowhere, King Tut's, the Professor's lawyer comes in, and essentially they realize that, you know, that there's nothing more they can do. They have to wait for their day in court. That we also see Harvey slowly trying to rebuild back to his old position and is preparing for this case. And of course, the next scene is a court case, and we get to see Harvey really rock the courtroom. This is what I like about Harvey Dent. He is a crime fighter in the day. His job is to make sure there is a conviction, provide evidence with reasonable doubt that the person is guilty. The tactics used here can be a bit questionable, but he's trying to win a case here, so I can't really say that he's using not really dirty tactics, but he's trying to really help benefit his case. As a result, King Tut is convicted, but he's not sent to any medical institution. He's sent to serve a sentence in prison, in the Gotham Penitentiary. Bit different here. King Tut's a villain that honestly is one you don't think gets locked up in a prison. It's always a medical institution. We then cut to where Bruce, Harvey, and Harriet and Dick are at Wayne Manor toasting Harvey Dent's win. And it's also shown just how thankful Harvey is of Bruce for believing in him and essentially never giving up and, getting him back on track. Dick resents Harvey, clearly jealous of the attention Bruce gives to Harvey every time he's around. Again, something I like, that it's clear Robin is the jealous type. And he definitely doesn't trust him that much because he used to be a criminal. Honestly, Dick can act a bit shallow at times. Just as that's happening, Alfred calls Bruce and Dick away, saying that they're essentially in code that they're getting a call from the Bat phone. They then answer it and end up going to Police HQ. It should also be noted that just as they left, Harvey Dent is setting up a bachelor auction for a chosen charity of his that will play a bit of a role later in the movie. Just as they get to Commissioner Gordon's office, they find a book that has pretty much been eaten by essentially worms, and they realize that this is Bookworm. So I'm already liking this. They brought Bookworm back. Again, Bookworm only really made one 2-part appearance in season 1, but despite him really only making one appearance in the original show's run, I felt it was a missed opportunity he never came back, especially in season 3 when you had the Barbara Gordon work at the Gotham Library. I just felt it was just a missed opportunity. The clue, as a result they were given, leads Batman and Robin to the Gotham Library. And if I could say one thing I think this movie had a missed opportunity, they're going back to the Gotham Library. They could have used this as the opportunity to bring back Batgirl, but of course, sadly, the lady Yvonne Craig passed away, I think way before these films were, ever made, so sadly, she could not appear in the film. I find that really upsetting and sad, but I get it. I felt that she could have at least played a bit of a role, at least given a bit of a cameo to suit up once again. Anyway, I felt it was just a missed opportunity. Just as that's happening, they see the Bookworm break into essentially the vault where all the rare books. And these books include the Tales of Two Cities, the Man in the Iron Mask, and the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And just as he's about to take these books, Batman and Robin pretty much said they're about to stop him, but then Bookworm's henchmen come out, and we get a funny fight scene, and of course we get a nice little callback to Bookworm's first appearance when Batman says, "Wait, aren't you guys forgetting something?" and he tells his henchmen to take off their glasses. Eventually, of course, like it always has, Batman and Robin end up winning the fight, and Chief O'Hara and his men come to arrest Bookworm and his men. But there's 2 problems. The books get stolen, but not by Bookworm or anyone in his crew. But it's also revealed that Bookworm never sent the clue. So someone's, double-crossed him? Already they've realized that something's wrong with these capers. They decided to have another look. The King Tut caper involved stealing a biplane and a double-decker bus, and Bookworm involved a double-cross, and the books somehow are tied into the theme of duality. Realizing the number two theme that has occurred in these plots, they come up with a horrifying discovery that Two-Face is back. But there's one problem. Harvey Dent's been cured. How can he be Two-Face? Well, there's only one way to find out. Batman logics that they must go to Two-Face's last known hideout for any possible clues. A place found on Gemini Drive. Of course it is. Just as they get there, we find Two-Face there. Or is it? Even though we see the scarred side of Two-Face, his scarred side, the other side, I'd say the more normal looking side, is hidden in silhouette, in the shadow. So we can't fully see who the other guy is, who the other half is. And when Batman gets there, they're shocked to see it's Harvey, but they can't they're shocked to see it's Two-Face, but they don't know if it's Harvey because he's covered in the shadow. This results in a fight scene where they essentially end up getting knocked out with a giant 2 sign literally falling on top of him. But before the goons could kill him, Two-Face says he needs to flip the coin as the coin decides their fate. Nice thing they keep intact with Two-Face. Even for 66, Two-Face decides everything by the flip of his coin. He flips it and it comes up heads. Realizing that, they will live. For now, the goons don't like it, saying that they should kill him. But just as they say that, Two-Face points his guns at them, saying if they talk out of turn again, they'll be, dead on the chopping block. As a result, the goons end up taking all the stuff away, and essentially run off. Batman and Robin quickly get up, and realize that they need to go and check Harvey. Again, they didn't fully see Harvey on the scarred side, so they can't fully possibly tell if it was Harvey. Just as they go back to Harvey's office, they, of course, with the usual bat climb up, they find that Harvey is normal, not scarred. And they reveal that Two-Face is back, Two-Face is back, possibly someone impersonating him. Harvey Dent agrees to fully cooperate as again, he is a good guy. He's one of the good guys, and it's his job to help. Robin is still suspicious and believes Harvey might be involved, and Batman is trying to prove he's innocent. This leads to a really great scene to me in the Batcave, where finally they break the air when Robin says, "Harvey's clearly involved. He's clearly behind all of this. Why can't you see it? You're letting your friendship blind you. And as a result, you only see the good, not the bad." But Batman points out that he's jealous of Harvey. Jealous how Batman likes him, and jealous of Harvey's friendship with Bruce Wayne. It's clear that you're so jealous, you're willing to jump on the shark without doing any proper investigation. This results in essentially a funny scene where Batman tells Robin to go to his room. It should also be noted that we also see a scene where even though Harvey Dent's mouth is covered by essentially a phone, it's revealed that Harvey is in league with Two-Face, but he doesn't want to be. It's almost like he's forced into it. The two had to come up with essentially a deal. He agreed where essentially where Two-Face essentially helps Harvey win these cases recently to restore his public image, whilst he steals these villains' loot to finance his latest criminal caper. And it's clear that Harvey does not want to be party to this. We also find out that he essentially goes back to Hugo Strange and essentially kidnaps him. Why? We don't know. Now, because of this Two-Face investigation, Batman is forced to blow off his date with Catwoman, and Catwoman is essentially mad that she got stood up. So she plans a jailbreak. She essentially switches places with her lawyer, and this lawyer happens to have been the one that represented King Tut in his trial. And just as she makes her escape, the lawyer is dressed up in the Catwoman costume, and essentially no one believes her that, this woman's escaped. And a nice little interesting trivia here. The woman who plays the voice as the lawyer is Lee Merriweather. And if that actress' name should sound familiar, it should. She played Catwoman in the live-action Batman 66 movie, and of course had a guest appearance in a King Tut case. We then have the scene of essentially Dick escaping Wayne Manor dressed up as Robin to follow Harvey Dent, thinking that Harvey Dent is involved and is pretty much behind the whole thing. And we get the scene where he is tailing Harvey all the way to an abandoned warehouse, and as soon as Robin gets in there, he is knocked out behind, just as Harvey quickly tells him to get out while he can. When Robin comes to, Two-Face is there. Of course, his good side is shrouded in mystery again. And it's revealed that Two-Face has teamed up with Hugo Strange to make a new and improved evil extractor, and of course, with Robin here, will be their new test subject. Of course, Batman does find out that Robin is, of course, missing, and essentially goes over Gotham City to find him, only to see a Robin, that has been turned into a Two-Face, basically wrecking nearby streets and just causing all sorts of chaos. Eventually, Batman manages to do him with basically backhand slapping him, and takes him back to the Batcave, where he manages to cure him of his Two-Face affliction. Robin then, of course, reveals everything to Batman. Harvey's involved, but he's not Two-Face. Someone else is pulling the strings. And realizing that if Harvey must be involved, well, they need to find Harvey. And because of the bachelor auction, they naturally go there. And basically, it's this kind of gambling place. And honestly, gambling fits so well with Two-Face, as again, gambling is a thing of chance. Eventually, just as they get there on essentially a giant, pool table, Two-Face essentially pulls a trap on them and results in quickly apprehending Batman and Robin. Two-Face then orders his men to send out letters all over Gotham to Gotham's criminal elite to come for this big auction. As a result, villains like the Joker, the Riddler, the Penguin, Mr. Freeze, the Clock King, Egghead, and Shame turned up, along with Catwoman, who was also invited. Just as this is happening, everything is now revealed, and the scene we're about to go into really explains everything if you're still wanting to know what the hell's going on. It's revealed again why Harvey took the deal to deal with Two-Face, because he couldn't stand being, at the bottom of the barrel. He wanted to be back top. And in many ways, he kind of never deserved it. Again, he never asked to go insane for this whole thing. It just happened. And you could see a bit shallow to this whole thing. But then we get the biggest twist. It turns out Harvey Dent is Two-Face. But how? Not through makeup. It turns out when the accident happened, it sort of bonded with them. Though they might have healed up the scar, it actually comes back up. Essentially, Two-Face is literally two people living in the one body. A thing that's always often to describe Two-Face, but this is, I think, the first time where a film actually went with that, saying that, you are literally having two people in the one body. There's also a nice throwback to the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde character, again, the thing that inspired Two-Face to begin with. And it's also clear that Two-Face is quite the manipulator and has a stronger presence over Harvey, essentially forcing Harvey into doing this, and essentially playing on his weakness and essentially insecurity. It's also revealed why the bachelor auction was set up. Two-Face needed to prove once and for all that Batman and Bruce Wayne are one and the same. Two-Face managed to come to the conclusion, and Harvey Dent only agreed to arrange this because he thinks he knew that Bruce Wayne was not Batman. Bruce would never keep something like this from him. They're old friends. But of course, Batman is then unmasked. Actually unmasked. Something I was shocked. They never did this in the original series. In fact, they would always have something where if he had to take off the cowl, it would usually be like something hiding or being obscured. So he actually got to take off his cowl. Something I found really interesting and really hurt Harvey because, he's saying, how could you do this to your old friend? And that makes Two-Face one hell of a son of a bitch. And of course, with that conclusion, they naturally come to the logic that Dick Grayson is naturally Robin. And here we get to a really great scene, where essentially, Batman and Robin are tied onto a giant coin, an iconic trope in the now Two-Face mythology of, the infamous giant coin trap. And it turns out the reason why this is happening is because he's going to auction Batman and Robin off to the highest bidder with their true identity. And as a result, 8 of the villains are here. Now, originally, Catwoman is at first looking like he's outbidding the rest of the villains, but all the villains decide to team up, bring all the dough they have together to give it to Two-Face and share in the whole thing, the share in the demise of Batman. Everyone wants to get a piece of it, and as a result, Two-Face agrees. And it turns out this whole thing was actually a ruse. While this was happening, in the seats they were sitting in, Hugo Strange was sucking all the evil out for them to fill up in the biplane that Two-Face stole at the beginning of the episode. In the beginning of the movie. Well, roughly beginning, during the King Tut caper. But just as this is happening, Batman realizes that in order to save them, they have to activate the trap. And hoping if they can time it just right, they can get out. And of course, the trap goes off, and Batman and Robin manage to get themselves out of it with the help of Catwoman. And here we get a nice 3-way fight scene. I really like it. It's a kind of a throwback to the Season 3 fights with Batman, Robin, and Batgirl, though this time they now have Catwoman fighting along with them. Eventually, all the villains have been subdued, but Two-Face has made his escape along with the biplane. Realizing that what he plans to do is turn Gotham City into essentially everyone in the city into Two-Faces. A pretty interesting plot, and I guess really to bring out people's bad side. An interesting plot, and kind of stakes, because he's trying to turn the city into essentially disfigured freaks. Something I find very interesting and surprisingly fitting for Two-Face, as Two-Face is often viewed in the Rogues Gallery as a shunned freak, especially during the Two-Face early incarnations in the 40s, the end of the Golden Age, and even his sporadic appearance in the Silver Age and early appearance of the Bronze Age. With that, Batman and Robin quickly hop on the Bat Cycle, which makes a reappearance, and try to follow Two-Face and take down his biplane. And this then eventually leads them to being ejected up in the air, and they use their bat rocket boots to help get them on the plane, and essentially force the plane to crash into essentially a boiling oil factory. But it turns out Two-Face survived the crash and runs further into the building as it's on fire. Batman says practically, "You're never gonna take me in alive." Realizing that, Batman realizes he has to take down Two-Face alone, and asks Robin to stay outside, but also telling him that he values him as a partner, and that will never change. As Batman is going further into the factory that's on the verge of exploding, he is knocked out behind by Two-Face. Harvey expresses his regret to being involved in this, but Two-Face, finally sick of Harvey, tries to literally choke himself, resulting in the evil personality fully taking over, and essentially becoming like a one face. But however, he's used up all his bullets and gets into a very brutal fist fight with Batman. It's brutal and absolutely epic. And just when you think that Two-Face has Batman dead to rights, Batman says, "Doesn't the coin need to decide?" And Two-Face agrees to that, takes out his coin, and flips it to get the death side. However, it comes up blank. In fact, and he doesn't know what's going on. Batman encourages for Harvey to fight back, and as a result, half of Harvey's face starts to come back to normal. And just when Two-Face is about to strangle Batman, Harvey says no. He's his friend, the only person that had his back when no one else would. And eventually, we get an awesome and even funny scene of essentially Two-Face punching himself. It's funny and it's comedic, but surprisingly staying true in character. Eventually an explosion happened, and looks like it killed Harvey, but it turns out it didn't, and Harvey returns back to normal with his face fully healed. With the help of Batman, they quickly rush out of the factory before it explodes. After the experience, Harvey passes out and is essentially taken to a mental institution. Commissioner Gordon and all the police come in saying that they've rounded up all the villains, but Catwoman has escaped. And we spend the next few minutes of the movie with Batman and Robin going all over the city, giving everyone that's been infected by the the evil extractor virus, I would call it, and reverts everyone back to normal. We then end the movie where Harvey Dent meets Bruce and Dick, but has no recollection of them actually being Batman and Robin. Bruce comes to the conclusion that, well, under maybe the influence of Two-Face could have been the possibility. And it turns out that all at Wayne Manor for a bachelor auction. The first one to be auctioned off is Batman. And the first person to bid is Catwoman. And that's where we end the episode. It should be noted at the very end of, well, technically we end the movie, and at the very end of the movie, we get a little teaser with the Joker getting broken out of prison by Harley Quinn. This film, oh my god, Burt Ward and Adam West, Burt Ward as both Batman and Robin, and Bruce and Dick is fun as always. It's some of my highlights, and you can really tell, even though Adam West is old and his age clearly tells, he's giving his best to deliver one final performance as Batman. And Burt Ward absolutely does well too. We get Lee Merriweather as Miss Diamond, essentially the lawyer. I like the little Easter egg of her dressed up in the Catwoman costume. Again, a throwback to the movie, that as she was Catwoman in the live-action movie. A nice little throwback, and just a nice little Easter egg for the fans. Julie Newmar is also here. Again, her voice of being old is very noticeable, but I like it regardless. And I kind of like how, with this being the final incarnation, or the final appearance of this particular incarnation of both Batman and this version's Catwoman, I like it how it ends on a happy note with them two essentially getting together. Probably I'm looking too much into it, but that's how I like to view how it ended, and I kind of liked that. The supporting characters from Aunt Harriet, Alfred, Commissioner Gordon, and Chief O'Hara are all fun and absolutely in character to how they are in this world that we are presented, and I loved every minute of it. And honestly, the actors here really bring to life the incarnation that they were done in the film, well, in the animated TV show, well, the original series, and I felt like it's just breathing life. Other notables include Hugo Strange, and again, Harley Quinn. Again, it makes sense for Hugo Strange, and my problem with Hugo Strange is he doesn't look like anyone from that 60s era, like a famous celebrity. That's my gripe, and I'm not a fan. Harley Quinn, however, is again here for fan service, and honestly, if I could be completely subjective, I'm not a fan. It should have, for me, it should maybe have been Poison Ivy and hinting to her Pamela Isley and hinting to her becoming Poison Ivy, and that way, if Adam West would have lived, she would be the next villain. Again, adapt villains that were there in the time period, not villains that were before the time, that were after the time period. For me, it just doesn't work that way. Other characters like King Tut and the Bookworm. First off, I like they brought the Bookworm back. Portrayed by Jeff Bergman. Absolutely, when I listen to that voice, it's like Roddy McDowall is back, even though he would, I believe, long passed away. It's great to have him back. King Tut, again, the same. Now, King Tut has a bit more screen time than Bookworm, but honestly, Wally Wiggett, who also voiced the Riddler, absolutely does a phenomenal job with the role, and has honestly breathed both the Riddler and the King Tut from the show to life. Absolutely fantastic. Others, of course, we get are the Joker, voiced by Jeff Bergman, and the Penguin, voiced by William Sellers. Again, fine. Again, Penguin doesn't sound like Burgess Meredith, but I get it. Also, I like the cameos we get from other villains. It makes sense for villains like Shame, Egghead, and Mr. Freeze to come back as they're pretty popular, but I was surprised they brought back the Clock King. I don't know, I thought Clock King was really not that popular, so I'm surprised they had him for a cameo. I mean, it would have made sense if they brought back the Mad Hatter, as honestly, he's funnily more remembered than the Clock King, but that's just me. But let's talk about the main villain of this movie. Two-Face. First off, I would not in a million years picture William Shatner in this type of role, but honestly, it made sense. You needed someone from the 60s who was famous, who is diverse in acting. Overacting or just craziness, I guess, made sense for William Shatner. Two-Face here is presented still as a straight, intimidating villain, but has a bit of comedic chops, but it comes out rarely, and most of this is due to, again, William Shatner's performance. For me, I consider him one of the most unique interpretations of Two-Face out there, and that's something we rarely, if ever, have gotten to see. I also like how they used the young William Shatner's likeness, how he looked back in the 60s, making you wonder if we actually got Two-Face to appear in the actual live-action show, it would have been great to see William Shatner as Two-Face on the show. But this is a consolation prize. And honestly, having another big cult 60s actor absolutely brings the more authenticity to this universe. Again, it's set in a certain time period. Another thing I also want to tip my hat off to this Two-Face is it's more of a throwback to how he started out in the comics. First off, the appearance of Two-Face reminds me so heavily of how he looked in the early comics, before we now have the more iconic red scarring or blue scarring if you watch the animated series. He was originally had green, and again, this was more of a throwback to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, another thing I really appreciate. I think this is, even though it's campy 60, it's still very much a throwback to old school Two-Face, and that's what I love about it. And there we have it. That was Batman vs. Two-Face, the final chapter so far in the Batman 66 chronological series. Is a fitting tribute. For me, this film, if I could describe it, while the first one was clearly much a love letter to the series, I appreciate this one going in a completely different direction and wanting to do something different, introducing a villain that sadly never got to appear on the show and was around during that time period. They got another 60s icon actor to play the role of this villain, but most importantly, it ends the 60s saga. This is it. We're never gonna see Batman like this again. Maybe there might be a third film down the line, who knows, but I'm skeptical, because for me they can't do it without the magic that Adam West did. So for the last time, this was the same Steven Hour, this was the same Steven Channel. So long for now, and Adam West, rest in peace. You haven't seen this film, ladies and gentlemen, give it a watch. It's Adam West's final performance, and it's a performance you need to see to pay the ultimate respect to an absolute man, a legend, and an all-around great human being. So long for now.